The Venus Project. Team Speak Seminar. September 25, 2011.
Try and think of some simple but effective experiments to show an audience how they can have their point of view changed.
You have to use the same methods that scientists use. You have to demonstrate things to whatever extent you can. Demonstrate how scientists work, how they arrive at decision making. In other words, the average person sits around and talks to one another. What do you think, Bob? What do you think, Marion? And that sort of system was good 50 or 100 years ago. I would say today we can test things more so. And we have to learn how scientists arrive at decisions. And once you use a scientific method, it doesn't mean that your decisions will be perfect. They'll be far more accurate than just opinions.
How would you describe human sex drive? What is learned and what is not learned of the sex drive?
Well, when I went to the Out Islands in the South Pacific when I was about 21 years old, all the natives wore no clothing at all. They were swimming nude when they were children, and so no male would ever stare at a female body. There were no fetishes, meaning preferential portions of the body. They didn't stare at the women's bodies. They looked at their eyes when they talked to them. But you got to remember that all our fetishes, all our habits are brought on by books, novels, motion pictures, our conduct. If you run cowboy pictures for 2 weeks and show them to little girls, say they watch the cowboy pictures, they behave as cowboys. If you raise people in a different culture, Germany say, they speak German. They have German expressions. It seems to me that it seems so obvious that if you were raised by the headhunters of the Amazon, you'd be a headhunter. I'm trying to say that if you were raised in ancient Rome, where people believed in many different gods, that would be your particular point of view. You cannot escape your culture unless you travel and read books that have varying ideas, then your range of decision-making becomes modified.
I thought it was interesting when I first used to go to your lectures that you talked about how sometimes a child could start a fire and get so excited over that they'd have an orgasm, and then they needed to start fires in order to have that reaction.
Different people are conditioned by environment, by experience. They behave in ways reacting to those experiences. All you inherit from your peers, your father and mother and your ancestors, is the shape of the nose, the color of the eyes, but you do not inherit a value system. You do not inherit bigotry, prejudice, greed. All that is learned by being brought up in a scarcity environment that renders a person insecure. But remember, language has to be learned. Your parents point out cup, table, light, over and over again, mama, papa, so you pick up those words and facial expressions. No American child was ever born speaking English. No German child was ever born speaking German. They had to learn it. That's why you go to school. They teach 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 and 2 is 4. 4 and 4 is 8. Over and over again, and you think you inherited that. You learn that. You learn to be prejudiced, bigoted in the environment you're reared in. If you take a Southerner, he speaks with a Southern accent. You can't say to that person, stop speaking with a Southern accent. They can't. And if you don't understand the meaning of environmental exposure, if you travel to different countries, you'll notice that Germans speak German fairly much like one another. They react with the same facial expressions and values as the German people. If you're brought up in France, you react like a Frenchman. If a Frenchman travels to America, they speak with an English-French accent. That's how you say, it seems to me that you've come from France. I say, how did you know that? They tell you by their accent. If a person speaks with a Southern accent, you say, what part of the South are you from? Where do you think you got that from? It's not inherited, it's learned.
Is it possible that computers with AI could make science by themselves someday after programming?
You mean do research and invent things? If that's what you're talking about, yes, it'd be possible someday.
Would names be more scientific in a resource-based economy?
Well, today, of course, people feel that their names helps identify their relationship. Actually, there are 10,000 Sams in the world, lots of Jacks, lots of Bernard, lots of names that are the same, John Smith. A name doesn't tell you anything about a person. In the future, the name will tell you their areas of interest, their behavior. So when you meet a person and they have a name, the name will indicate what they're interested in. Each letter in the name will tell you that it's in art, music, chemistry, physics, whatever they're interested in. But today a name doesn't tell you a damn thing.
Other than environmental abuse, this person is saying that there's a growing body of evidence that there are those who are born with diminished abilities to develop mirror neurons or have dysfunctional parts of the brain, for example, and these people are more likely to commit murders, rape, genocide, and other violent crimes. What should be done to defend against the neural-born psychopaths?
Well, they need hospitalization, and there
Sociopaths.
they would be dealt with. In other words, in the future, we will do a great deal of research on brain mechanisms and how to modify human behavior. That's what the problem is, modifying human behavior. And the only way that can be done is to engineer an environment that deals with that. For example, if you want to become a doctor, you have to go to the university and study medicine. If you want to be a chemist, you have to go to a chemistry environment. I'm sure you all understand that. I don't like to repeat myself all the time, but the questions always appear to be the same. If you want to become an auto mechanic, you have to study engines, automobile engines. If you want to be a Volkswagen mechanic, you study the Volkswagen in particular. If you want to work on the human eye, you have to study visual problems and go to a school and become an ophthalmologist. You always have to expose yourself to an environment that emphasizes the subject matter that you feel you want to study.
Do you think sometimes it's misunderstood that people that they think are sociopaths and born with brain damage are really their values through their culture produce the same type of behavior?
Similar behavior. It's very difficult for the average person to tell whether a person is mentally aberrated or socially aberrated. In other words, you think a Nazi has got something wrong with them? No, they have nothing wrong with them. They've been exposed to a Nazi environment. A Southerner that's a racist is not born that way. That's why you can't get mad at people. If you understand the environment they come from, what you can do is expose them to information that turns you around. And if you expose them to information sufficiently, and you know how to do that, you can change their thinking about any given subject.
How do you think your ideas can coexist with multicultural world with different traditions, even with low technological ones?
Oh, I really don't understand your question, but I'm going to try to answer it. Your values and all decisions that you make are related to your culture. No one that lived 500 years ago, if you say you can have anything you want, they can't say, I'd like a single-engine aircraft. They can't say that because it doesn't exist. They can't say they'd like a stainless steel refrigerator because it doesn't exist. All your decision-making is always within the frame of reference of the culture you're reared in.
So you think people who have different traditions and low technology in their culture could understand the resource-based economy?
No, unless you explain it to them in detail, in a language that they can understand. That depends on your skills and ability to present information to people rather than argue with them. You never argue with a person. You present information to them if they understand what that means. If they don't understand what that means, you have to educate them in the methods of evaluation that you have.
The cities you design can be a total enclosure system. Such a city can produce everything necessary. Oh, I guess he's asking, there's no question, but can such a city produce everything that's necessary?
No, not everything is necessary, but the things that we've arrived at. You can't solve all problems. You can't design the best computer in the world. It depends on your knowledge of computers. You can only design the best computer you know of up to now. In the future, they get smaller, lighter, faster, and they do much more. But that depends on innovation. No one can design the best city. I can, no one else can. You can design the best city you know of, which utilizes less energy and is more comfortable for people. But it's never the ideal city. It's the best you know of up to now. In the future, even if I designed the best city I knew of, it would be a straitjacket to the kids of the future. They'll design their own cities. And that goes for everything. I repeat myself because the questions are the same.
Are there roads, tunnels between cities for supply resources when necessary?
Yes.
What are the backups for a city in terms of resources, food, materials, or electronics, and where are they positioned?
First of all, there's a distribution center. The best way to think about that is to think of an ocean liner with 1,000 passengers. How do they know how much water to bring? How do they know how much food to bring? By the amount of passengers and statistical studies in the background. That's the way the cities of the future operate. The amount of people in the city. If it's 10,000 people or 500,000 people, then the amount of water that's delivered to that city is based on the population, and the amount of water and the amount of food and the amount of refrigeration and air conditioning is based on the temperature of surrounding the city, the climate of the city. All those decisions are based upon surveys, just as you would do it today. If you take 10 people on a trip or a picnic, you know how much food to bring for 10 people. But if it's 150 people, you may not be that skilled. You might have to ask someone else that has more experience in that area. All those decisions are based upon conditions that prevail.
Will we still be based on man and wife? Wife and husband system? Is one partner per person really the most healthy way? Or will we have multiple partners and multiple relationships?
Oh, I believe in the distant future, you'll have multiple partners and multiple relationships. Some people will, some won't. It depends on their unique upbringing.
Can the elite keep this system going?
No, it has nothing to do with elitism. It has to do with the purchasing power of the great majority of people. If they lose their jobs to automation, if machines begin to take on most jobs, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you'll notice that in supermarkets today, they're working on automated cashiers, where you run your card through and you price all the objects yourself. In time, we will replace most human jobs. And when you do that, the majority of people will not have the purchasing power to buy the goods or services required. That's the end of the monetary system. The monetary system depends on people buying things. If you outperform that system by getting rid of people, using more machines, the system will die. Banks have to lend money to people to survive. If the majority of people cannot borrow money, the banks will fail. You can't hang on to a system. In other words, what happened to the blacksmith? They don't work anymore. Most people who used to work on the farm have come into the cities and have taken up jobs. They too will be replaced eventually. All systems, no matter what kind of social system you have, undergo social evolution. Social evolution means in the very early days, people used to listen to the witch doctors. In Salem, Massachusetts, they used to burn witches. In America, we had slaves, thousands of slaves. George Washington had 300 of them. Today, he'd be run out of town. The people you admired in the past are not admirable. They are lived in a certain condition with certain value systems, and the value systems that were dominant at that time do not fit the present day. And if the society cannot make an adjustment to oncoming changes, they will be surpassed by other countries.
Do you think that the people in differential advantage or the elite can hang on to things just by the sheer fact that they have the money?
I just answered that question.
Somebody asked if the Venus Project doesn't believe in politics and also prefer everyone to work under the same umbrella, what is it that Scott Keller, he's the person running for president under a resource-based economy, and the organizations mentioned on the web page have that it's different, so that the Venus Project is willing to put their names on our web? Scott Keller has asked for our cooperation because he is talking about a resource-based economy. There are a lot of people all over the world who are trying to get this information out there and talk about the Venus Project through political means because they feel that they have more of a voice that way or more of a platform. We just say anything that works, give that a try.
I would agree with that, Roxanne. Anything that works. Use whatever system you can to better inform people into improved decision-making. And the only way you can improve decision-making is by studying the environment, the water, the arable land, the amount of people living in the city. You have to have information before you can make those decisions. So the more information you have in process levels for raising children so they don't get into fights with one another, so that children would not want to hate any other races, you have to indoctrinate children so that they no longer become racist. You have to do something about that, not hope that your children grow up to be sane. You can make them saner through education.
One of the issues we face in the future is the issue of using advances in biotechnology and genetics in humans that I believe will open the gap between those who will be genetically modified and those who are not. How do you think we could address this problem? We're still living in the paradigm of a current monetary system and political economic system.
I myself do not accept genetic modification until a great deal of studies have been made in relation to the effects, the long-term effects of genetic modification.
During the transition period from the system we have now to the Venus Project, how do you see things like hospitals, schools, and grocery stores still working if there's no profit?
I don't see them working. I see a social collapse. I see people who do not give food or checks from the government will break windows in supermarkets and take the food they need. I expect a lot of trouble ahead all over the world, not just America. America hasn't even begun to face the problems yet, but there's going to be a lot of trouble during the transition if we're able to make it. And it depends on how late we start. If we damage the environment too much, there may be a point of no return. It depends on how much effort and work you put out to help modify human values. Most human values today are unsane, not insane, unsane. The difference unsane means they're either brought up with race prejudice, bigotry, profit-seeking. There are many people that seek wealth, property, and power. Those values can only lead to hell on earth. The only values that will eventually work is when you declare all the earth's resources as the common heritage of all the world's people and share resources with all people. But a few nations learn to control most of the earth's resources, you're going to have territorial disputes no matter how much you enact laws. Man enacting laws to control human behavior is the wrong way to go about it. It's not laws that we need. It's the conditions that generate aberrant behavior that have to be outgrown.
This person is talking about how you talk about arriving at decisions on all factors, and he's saying, but there are decisions made along the way, all during the process of constructing a building, for instance, like engineers lay out the manner the building will be erected, the information is passed on to contractors and traders. So could you please clarify how decisions like this will be made? Who decides what is built and when it is built?
It isn't who decides, it's how do they arrive at their decisions. You don't make decisions. What you do is you test materials in a testing lab. You test I-beams. You test structural elements. You test the torsion of tubes. And you give a performance chart and the nature of the metals involved in the structural materials. In other words, I don't know if you know this, they make concrete cylinders and they put them in a hydraulic press. And they bring the hydraulic system down on the concrete to see how much pressure that concrete can stand. And once they arrive at that, you know your concrete mixture for a 17-story building. You cannot sit down and just mix concrete and put up a building. What you have to do is stress test it. You stress test materials, and those things you can't stress test, you can't work with. So you see, even in the aircraft industry, they test the wing structures, they put them under different loads to see what they can stand. That's how they arrive at decisions. Today we make decisions. In the future, they will arrive at decisions through testing, rather than what do you think, Mr. Jones? What do you think, Mr. Benson? All that system was great 100 years ago, but today we have better methods.
Andrew, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say on the sort of arriving at decisions on things like buildings and things like this, we won't just build buildings for the sake of building buildings. They'll be built based on the feedback of the environment of what's needed within that city. If it turns out that there's a massive plague in an area and there's more hospitals needed, then more hospitals get built. And it would be temporary until those conditions have been dealt with and those conditions are normalised, and then you wouldn't need that hospital anymore. It could be taken down or restructured into a different function of a building. And the same with things like agriculture. You wouldn't just keep on building lots of agricultural towers and areas and stuff. It would be based on the amount of people that are actually in that city. So everything would be subject to survey to make sure that you're applying your technology and your constructions to the needs of that environment, not excessively.
Yes, exactly that, Andrew. What about sabotaging from the military or the government if they come into the Venus Project to make the resource-based economy fail?
Well, it depends on how many people are doing that, and it depends on why they're doing it. We have to be able to reach all kinds of people to enable to understand the advantages of the Venus Project. If we fail to do that, we will have as many problems that will evolve.
How are the mega machines like earth movers and heavy vehicles like dumpers be energized?
Most of them will operate electrically, and they'll be energized either electrical generators or what we call supercapacitors.
What do you think about the schools today, how it is, because it creates competitive environment between students?
Well, obviously, I don't agree with that. I believe in the study of science and not to grade students in the presence of other students so they develop ego problems and self-centeredness.
What's a more effective way to evaluate a person and check if he or she understands the topic?
Performance only.
If all the cities are immersed in beautiful gardens, who cleans the bird shit off the buildings? How would people protect themselves from animal attacks?
Well, if you really want to answer that problem, I don't know if you know much about boats, but people paint the rooftop of their boat with Bimini blue, and birds tend not to defecate on Bimini blue. There are many different studies in animal tropism, or the forces that shape animal behavior, and you can learn how to color buildings or generate certain types of sounds to keep certain insects off plants rather than spraying them with poison.
When and where will we see the first model of the new city with the technology proposed by the Venus Project?
I can't answer that. It depends on the work you do. Roxanne and I have absolutely no power. And the more people that talk about the Venus Project and educate people, the sooner you will see it.
We work at it all the time. We work at it 7 days a week, and all our funds go towards this. So we're doing the best we can, and we're trying to make contacts. And actually, now, since we have people working with us directly, there are a lot of people who are trying to make contacts and help the Venus Project in that way. In regards to food production, I have seen the design for the greenhouses and such. But what is Jacques and the Venus Project thoughts on meat production, such as beef and pork and chicken?
That would have nothing to do with me. It had to do with the education of people. And if they learn that there's less heart disease and less cancer in eating certain foods, they will pick that information and use it. It depends on the information available, the amount of research done, and the background of the people that are learning these things. If you cannot give up meat for whatever reason, you'll be able to eat it, but you'll be told the consequences. If you want to smoke cigarettes, people will be raised, the new children, not to even want to smoke or use anything that would damage the human body in any way whatsoever. They'll be told about it. And then if they do things that are counter to good health, they will have to face the consequences. You cannot force people to do anything. I do not believe in that kind of force, sending armies in to get people to fall in line with your point of view, or putting them in prison because they don't agree with you. I think people will have many different points of view in the future and live in accordance with those points of view. We will try to give people physical evidence to show them the effects of smoking on the lungs. Lung tissue can stretch, but when you smoke for a long period of time, it tends to tear very easily. It tends to turn black. You tend to get cancer after so many years of smoking. Most people, not all people. And you'll have to tell that to people so that they understand when they do smoke the consequences of it. Just as they're putting labels on canned food today, telling you how much salt, how much fat, etc.
I think this person may be talking about how animals are raised or the production of animals. I'm not sure.
Well, I'm not sure of what you mean, but I would say that if animals are raised as food, it would be an inefficient method because in order to make an 800-pound cow, you have to use lots of food, which would go much further feeding people. It depends on the amount of arable land, the conditions of the soil at the time. I can't tell you precisely what will be grown, what won't be grown. It would depend on a survey committee telling us how much arable land we have, how much water we have, and how large a population we have to feed.
And it would depend on a lot of science and research as to what is nutritionally beneficial for people. Today, you really can't get that type of research because it's always backed by one industry or the other. It always has a bias. It's trying to sell things. You never know today what the science that they come up with, whether it's real or whether they're just pushing a product. Andrew, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that actually. The Venus Project is not a dictatorship. It's not some kind of social experiment to tell people what they can and can't do within a resource-based economy. It's actually about liberating people and giving them open choice to do whatever they want, but also giving them the education to enable them to arrive at better solutions about the way they live their lives. If people deem through education that killing animals for food is considered aberrant or considered something that we could do without, then it's through education that would stop. You can't tell people that they can't eat meat. You can't say to people, hey look, you can't eat chickens, you can't eat beef or anything from now on because you're in the Venus Project. You'll just get rebellion against that. So really it all comes down to education. And the more people are educated and the more we have technology available to come up with different solutions to those problems. So for example, at the moment, there's lots of technology research going on in the biomedical fields for doing things like growing livers in the lab for people that need liver transplants. There's other technologies that are working towards actually growing beef or growing chicken in the lab based on its DNA structure and everything else. So it's likely that very soon we're going to have technological alternatives to actually going around killing chickens or killing cows and stuff. But like I said, it's not a dictatorship, so people have to have a choice but have the education to be able to make those choices as relevant as possible to the environment that you're in.
Excellent, Andrew. And when you try and ban something, it just goes underground. You really have to educate people as to what's really better from them from a scientific point of view. Did you want to talk about something specific today? Did you have something in mind?
First, I'd rather answer their questions if I can.
I think we've gone through most of them that are relevant. How about, do you think that this could be implemented from people protesting when they don't like their government?
Oh, I don't know what that means, protesting if they don't like their government. If you can find out that the railroad tracks are insufficient, they wear out asymmetrically, and you come up with ideas to correct it, that's the way you protest. You don't protest. You come up with counter ideas, and you present newer concepts of how to filter water, or whatever it is that you want to do. If you don't offer anything, if you merely criticize a government, that's not enough. You must come up with alternative proposals based upon study, not your own opinions.
Yeah, that's true for people who are in the streets protesting for human rights and democracy and freedom. They really don't pose an alternative. How do you achieve that? Just throwing out somebody and putting another person in usually reverts back to the same oppression if the corporations are at the helm.
In our present monetary system, that's true, Roxanne.
Do you agree that it's better to drop out of school and learn on your own after seeing how terrible the system is in preparing for the future challenges?
If you don't have the proper credentials, it'd be very hard to get a job unless you go through the formal educational system. Remember, the Wright brothers made a flying machine, but they had no qualifications except that they built one. Edison had no special qualifications, but he made the electric light. And so Louis Pasteur had qualifications. If you have qualifications, if you've gone to an accredited school, you stand a better chance. That's all I'm saying. It doesn't mean that you'll be more qualified to do a job. The institutions that exist use the institutional methods of evaluation, and that's why conforming to a limited extent will enable you to get more out of the system. But if you come up on your own, even though you know a great deal, the system does not recognize people that have earned the knowledge through hard work on their own, no matter how competent they are. Without credentials, you can't practice medicine, you can't practice law, you can't be a contractor without having the proper credentials. I don't say that that's right. I'm just telling you what is.
Is there something else that you wanted to deal with? Because that's the end of the questions as I see them.
Well, if you read The Best That Money Can't Buy, before you ask questions, you'll get many of the answers. And look at our website. We have thousands of answers and questions. Before you write in your question, become familiar with the Venus Project, how decisions are arrived at, and people do not make decisions, and what children will learn in the schools of the future. They will learn how to relate to one another. They will learn how to avoid arguments. They will learn how to not become parasites to a culture. Everyone will learn something useful that will benefit the lives of all people. So most of the people that you meet in the future, you'll be happy to meet because they're all in the domain of public service.
Do you think the word democracy is an appropriate description of anything in a resource-based economy?
No, not at all. The word democracy has no meaning. If you ask most Americans what they believe in democracy, they would say yes. Then ask them if they voted for the Vietnam War. They say, no, I didn't. Did you vote for the space program? No, I didn't. Did you vote for the design of the Pentagon building? No, I didn't. Well, where do you participate? Why don't you check it out and see if they really participate? They think they participate, but different people select the people running for political office. The basis for selecting them is that they intend to uphold established institutions. If you're out to change things, you won't get elected in a monetary-based society. The only people selected are those people that uphold existing standard institutions. So the people you can vote for are the people they select, and they put them up. In other words, they don't put people in there that are going to change the system. Why should they do that? They will lose their positions of advantage if they did that. So they put people in there that will uphold established institutions. Well, love in the future. Somebody want to know about that. The word love doesn't tell you anything. When a person says, I'm in love, they mean that they've selected a person that they'd rather be with than any other person. The problem with love is when you fall in love when you're 15, it's different than falling in love at 30. If your values keep changing, your notions of decision-making regarding wanting to be with a particular person would have to do with the experience you have. So if people undergo continuous change and the partner doesn't undergo that amount of change, love will diminish. What happened to love when people separate and the wife says, honey, I don't know what you want, but I want the house, the car, and the kids. What happened to love? Where's the love right now? What happened to it? Love is a fluctuating system, not a constant system. In the future, instead of the word love, there'll be extensionality. I've said this many times, but many people don't seem to grasp it. Extensionality means that the person you're with is able to extend your knowledge, make your life better. They can really make your life better by physical evidence. I don't mean words like, you're pretty, you're beautiful, you mean more to me than anything in the world. All those are words. But in the future, extensionality means genuinely informing other people and enhancing their lives. That is the real meaning of what they try to use the word love to describe. The word love doesn't describe a damn thing. In fact, most of your language, like I've said many times before, was designed hundreds of years ago, and the words are completely inadequate.
It's three questions. My first two questions about how to present the Venus project to other people, and the third one about Test City. My first question is, can you talk in the frame of the Venus project? Can you talk to the people like more about self-sufficient and independence to using that current technology, so they can supply their own homes with electricity and food just during the transition? Because I get the feeling some people have that rejection of the collectivism idea.
The question, do you think it's worthwhile to talk to people about how to be self-sufficient in their homes and energy efficient to help during the transition?
That would be done in the schools.
To help during the transition, should people...
Yes, you give them whatever information you have, or you can tell them where to look to get the information.
I don't know.
Yes, thank you very much. But that's the actual to specify that. Can I use that reference with Venus Project?
Can you use a reference with the Venus Project? In terms of being self-sufficient in homes and things like that?
Yes, because as I understood, the Venus Project says that it's not. Some things should be centralized.
We talk about an overall systems approach to a city. A lot of people come to us and ask if we can design, or Jacques can design, a self-sufficient, energy-efficient home, but we always say we're not in the home building business. We do give references to other dome companies, but we're really not out to give products and things like that to make it through the transition.
We're not concerned with that. We're concerned with the overall social design.
And a direction to work towards so everyone can live prosperously. Because living sustainably through the transition is not going to solve our problems. And if you even have a community, we said this a lot of times, if you even have a community that people gather together because they can't afford a home and they grow food and they take care of their needs, if things crash all around them, even if you have a high fence, people will be knocking at your door or climbing your fence if you have food and they don't. So any of that really won't solve our problems on a global scale or ultimately.
Okay, thank you very much. The second question, I'm not a scientist, but can you maybe in the Venus Project website give specific advices or hints how to save energy or do something now? So when we talk about Venus Project, we can make some advices to improve people's lives right now a little bit, so at least give them something.
Is there anything we can put on our website to help people save energy, or we can give them something today to work with?
Use your laptop. You can ask all kinds of questions about materials, conservation of energy, different types of available energy. You can get all that information from your laptops or go to the public library if you want information on specific problems.
Yeah, that's really out there. We have a section where we have videos of the latest technologies as well. We're updating that regularly. So some of those things might help.
My question actually, if I will refer people to the website, they can see advices and hints on the website itself, so they can connect that with the Venus Project to get their idea. It can work now and later.
We've got a section of the website under technology and then latest technology in the main menu, and you'll see there's lots of videos on sort of the latest technologies around the world on various things from biotechnology right through to sustainability and energy and things like that. But as far as actually advertising products and stuff from companies for specific single-use problems in society, it's not really something that the Venus Project sort of aiming towards.
Okay, thank you. And the third one about test city, will you consider to maybe invite families to introduce them to the idea, to condition them all together?
Are you talking about within the test city?
Yes, within the test city, or maybe something to make not their separate community, to make something like when you not work only with individual, with parents or with kids, work with families all together.
Would you be working with families all together in the new city to teach them new value system, a new direction, not just the kids or just the parents?
Yeah, we'll be working with all people, but that's done through telecommunication. You don't have to have a person there talking to people. All your television programs would be informative and useful. There'd be no commercials, there'd be no soap operas, except methods of teaching people how to relate to one another without getting into physical conflict or name calling.
I know in the past when Jacques used to work, a lot of people used to come to Jacques for help in different areas. And when parents would say, I want to bring my child to have him talk to you, Jacques would always say, well, you have to come as well to introduce the new value system to the whole family.
But in the future, that can be accomplished by telecommunication. You don't have to work with each family.
This person says, do you know an effective method to sleep? I have so many ideas inside my head, it seems impossible sometimes to fall asleep.
What you usually do is take a book of a different subject and read before you go to sleep. And if you read and detract yourself from the habit form of keeping you awake by riding over unfinished business. Usually most people don't sleep because they have a lot of unfinished business. So as best you can, you try to finish things, but if you find yourself unable to do that, pick up a book and read it and detract yourself from the habits of thought that have been established over a long period of time.
What would be a better and more efficient way to evaluate a person and check if he or she really understands the topic?
When they use words, if you're not sure, ask them what they mean by that word. That's the only way you can check it out. When a person says, I believe in a better world, then what do you mean by a better world? And if they fail to give you detailed description, you then can help them understand the limitations of their language.
Andrew, do you want to go over what the Venus Project University will be? And I'll add to that as well.
Yeah, sure. Okay, basically the TVP Learning Centre, there's two functions in there. One is the TVP University and one is the TVP Community College. I'll just give a quick brief overview of the Community College first. The Community College is an area where people can send in free online tutorials that they found in various subjects that would be relevant to the skills required in certain teams. So for example, if you wanted to join the 3D production team of the TVP design, you might find some videos, tutorials online for doing, I don't know, Maya or 3D Studio Max or something like this. You could then send those into webdev@thevenusproject.com and we'll add those to the library of online tutorials for the skills relevant to TVP design. And that would be the same for each of the individual teams. So if you found tutorials online for, say, creative writing or poetry or something like that, you could submit those for the writing team. And like I say, that goes for each of the teams. You can also submit your own videos. So for example, I've been doing CAD for years and years. I could sit here and use something like Camtasia, record some screen activity of me going through a basic tutorial in AutoCAD. I would then submit that video through webdev@thevenusproject.com. That would then get put up into the TVP design category, and then people could actually learn from my tutorial of how to use CAD, for example. So that's the community college side of things. So we feel that's quite a good way of, people often come and say, I'm not very skilled in many areas, I'm not technical, etc. What can I do? The idea is that now we can start raising the bar on what people can do by offering relevant training within those relevant skills so that people can start to contribute more within the teams and actually make the teams more productive at the same time. The TVP University side of things, basically it's going to be a culmination of all of the information on the website, all of the information available on all of the really relevant stuff on the internet. So instead of people having to go around searching around for different pieces of material, etc., we're going to pull it all into one section on the website where it will be laid out like a course in various sort of subcategories of the resource-based economy. We'll have lots of links to different audio and video relevant to the subject that you're reading about, or relevant to the subjects or area that you're reading about within those categories. It'll be an ongoing project. With Julia and Roxanne have been on it since around April time, and we're still not ready to put up the first section yet. It's a lot of work. We're hoping to have it done within the next couple of months to get the first section up so people can start seeing the kind of format that we'll be laying out the rest of it as it comes along.
Yes, we're dividing into many different topics, things about the resource-based economy and the values of the future and the different writings that Jock has done. We're taking it and compiling it. Andrew mentioned different subcategories, and within the writing there will also be audio taken from the 1970s and 80 lectures, taken from radio shows, taken from the 2010-2000 hours. Then we'll have video on each topic as well. There'll be a lot of different ways to learn different materials, and we'll see if we can get it out there in different areas as well. Other people's website, maybe Khan University would want the first online university about the Venus Project and the resource-based economy. So it will be a massive type of area where you can go and get whatever questions you want answered. Does Jacques believe in ethics?
Only functional ethics, meaning you educate children on how to solve problems, how to communicate. I don't know what the word ethics means. How to communicate in the most effective way known at the time. We don't have words like ethics. We have words like communication. We have words like the most effective way to work with other people of a different background.
Process levels and ethics depends on geography today. Do you have a list of what skills, tutorial subjects the community college is looking for?
Any branches of the physical sciences.
We're talking about the community college on the website. Andrew, do you have a list of that mentioned someplace? But it will be related to the projects we are working on immediately, the initial tutorials that we need.
Yes, we've got a list on the Learning Centre. If you go to the Learning Centre on the Venus Project website, which is the Venus Project menu, and then Learning Centre, you'll see under Community College there's submit a video tutorial or submit an audio tutorial. Once you click on that, you'll see a list of all the different teams and their subcategories and what kind of skills, etc. we'll be looking for within those categories.
Does Jacques think there is an age limit to learning new things?
No, I do not. I think it's the way you package the new information. If you know how to present information to different people with different value systems, you have to develop that skill. If they don't seem to be interested, it means that your method is not correct for reaching that person.
Do you believe that our brain loses elasticity over time?
Yes, but that would have little to do with your ability to communicate with other people. You can communicate with almost every value system today if you know something about the way they were raised, why they chose certain values. Then you will learn how to reach different people with different conclusions.
There's quite a heated intent to explain the difference between instinct and, what's the other word? Instinct and
Behaviour.
And behaviour, beg your pardon, yes, behaviour. It started with what would happen with a husband who cheats on his wife. I think basically it comes down to jealousy as well. And could that be addressed? Because it's been going around in circles for quite a while.
Jealousy is a byproduct of insufficient information.
They're talking about, is there a difference between instinct and human behavior? Did you hear that? Okay, I didn't know if you heard it.
Instinct has nothing to do with anything. All our behavior is learned. And if you wish to evolve your behavior so it's more sophisticated, you have to inquire into information on human behavior. You cannot deal with conflict if you don't have any information on the nature of conflict, what originates it, what generates it. You have no instinctive behavior. All that is BS, bad science. The only type of behavior to have that might be physiologically determined is that you move away from fire because it's painful, that you don't jump off high places because it hurts you. So you learn as an animal to gently drop from certain heights. No animal jumps off a 100-foot precipice because they know in experiencing life that the pain is too great. All those things are not instinctive, they are learned. An animal that doesn't know what a porcupine is will get closer to the porcupine until it gets stung. Then they'll stay away from the porcupine. It must get stung first. You have reflexes that are inborn, like the knee reflex or the eyelid coming down when a dust particle is moving toward the eye. But that depends on how fast the dust particle is moving. If it's moving faster than the eye can respond, it'll land in your eye.
Is there anything else in that conversation, Sue, that you wanted addressed?
Another thing is about reproducing. You know, he thinks that you always want to protect your chances of being able to reproduce.
Do you think reproducing, that people want to protect their chances of reproducing?
In the Venus Project, they would tend to maintain a population that corresponds with the carrying capacity of the environment. They'll be educated to do so.
One other thing on that, there's also a relevance there. If you look at countries that have very poor education, and then you look at countries that have a much higher relative education, generally in the less education countries you have much more childbirth. It's more a case of education than it is of any kind of instinctual wanting to bear offspring, for example. I can safely say that through my education throughout my adult life, the last thing I want is children, because I've got so much stuff I want to do for myself and so much stuff I'd like to do generally, especially towards this direction now. The last thing on my mind would be children, and I have absolutely no intent ever of having them. So it's certainly not the instinct doesn't overdrive your behaviour. It's your environment that does that, and the information available in your environment.
Jacques, could you go over the idea of instinct and the experiments you did with birds? That's interesting.
Well, I wanted to know, how does a mother bird know to feed its young? Well, the action of the bird and the degree of how much it opens its mouth and how much it moves that determines how many worms the mother will put in the bird's mouth. So I want to know whether the bird really knows or understands that, or is it just a simple reaction to the movement of birds. So I made a plastic bird with the mouth moving more than the real birds in the nest, and the mother put all the worms in the mouth of the plastic bird. So I think that birds are more like responding organisms rather than using instinct.
Yeah, it's not instinctually driven to take care of their young.
They'd say that people have the reproductive urge. That's all a lie. They just want to have sex, and reproduction is a byproduct of sex. People say, well, they want to have children. Do they really want to have children, or are they brought up to want to have children? Are they conditioned to want to have children? If they love children so much, how come they don't spend most of their lives with children? Because children are boring. They can't say anything new. They always are self-centered. They're mostly very spoiled. So I would say that if people really love children, they would spend their lives around children. They don't have children after they get married. Don't you see that? That it's a conditioned reflex, that you're brought up to want children. You're brought up to say, hey, I'd like to have my name carried into the future. They're not interested in their kids. They're interested in their names. They're interested in their names going on into the future. Why? Because they're brought up to that value system. If you're saner, there are so many other options other than having kids that are much more interesting and informative. I'm just saying you're brought up to do that, that's all.
Doesn't mean that you don't, no, I mean, but it doesn't mean that you don't nurture kids. If you have them, you want to make them better than you. A lot of times people try, and when they do have kids.
So
I know you're not saying that.
There are people that don't want to have kids. What kind of instinct do they have? Don't you see? You have to check all different systems to find out. If you understand what I'm saying, people that love children will be working with children most of their lives.
There's another thing that Jacques did to verify the idea of instinct, and they say that the birds sit on their eggs because of instinct and the motherly instinct. So the bird had, about 3 eggs, and somebody told them that the birds sit on the eggs because they have itching areas. Itching spots. And the eggs alleviate some of that. So Jacques made about 4 marble eggs that are cooler, that the birds, it had more effect on the itching spot. Jacques put those marble eggs in the nest, and the bird threw out all the real eggs and sat on the marble eggs instead. So if it had a real instinct, it wouldn't have done that.
Humans project their own value systems into furniture, animals, all kinds of things. They say the animal loves me. They project their own values, and that has a lot to do with the people selecting companions. They project their own values into the other person. Then they say, well, you've changed. You're not like you used to be. Well, it's our own projections that get us into trouble, not so much the behavior of other people. The real world doesn't hurt people. Whatever happens in the real world is real. What you think should have happened is not real. So you're hurt by your own projections. The world doesn't hurt you. If a girl falls in love with somebody and then she says, you know, I thought I loved them, but I really don't, it means your projections about the person were erroneous. Misinformation hurts you. If people have misinformation, say if you're Afro-American, they're brought up to dislike Afro-Americans in some area of the South, that's what you have to deal with. You have to deal with the real world and change those values. And if you don't know how to change those values, you have to practice experimental psychology and practice how to change values. You become good at it only if you work at it, not if you hope that the other person learns to understand things the way you do.
It says in Jacques' older lectures, he says that human selfishness is derived from the selfishness. That seems very counterintuitive. Can you explain why I should not be selfish using physical reference?
Selfish is based on scarcity. If you live in a world where there's very little water, you tend to accumulate water. If there's water all around you, drinking water, you tend not to accumulate it. You tend to accumulate that which is scarce. So what we hope to do is overcome scarcity.
Is this sentence true? If we don't reach out to spread the Venus Project ideas in the world for enough people, then after the collapse, we will just begin the same shit as we have now.
True.
How can we control humane experiments? I'm not sure what they're asking there.
Don't torture animals.
Maybe.
You might
And
have
then on
to,
humans.
you have to come up with ideas that will not use animals for experiment. For example, if you took a cancerous growth and kept it alive and treated the cancerous growth, that's what your problem is. Not giving people radiation or not using chemotherapy. What you try to do is treat the diseased organism, learn to control the population of disease-causing organisms, learn to manipulate them, learn to make them grow faster, slower, gain control over living substances. That's the way you learn how to fight disease. You don't fight it in a complete organism. You don't treat the human being, you treat the growth that's offensive or dangerous to the human being. You work on the bacteria that hurt people. You learn how to control them.
I guess that's about it.
Yeah, that's all for this week. Thanks everyone for coming. Another good Q&A. Thank you, Jack, for your insight into many areas and some great explanations there. Thanks to Roxanne as well. Thanks everyone for coming.
Okay, thanks everyone. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.